Hello, it's now Tuesday the 27th of May 2025 and this is 2 days after the UK Ultra South Downs Way 100 Ultra Trail Race. As usual, I'm sat here in my big, heavy, snuggly top and it's 2 days on. I left it 48 hours really before I recorded this because I wanted to allow myself a little bit of recovery time and rest before I put words to paper, so to say. Spoiler alert, I did finish this time at my third attempt, and this is how it went. So in the week beforehand, I ended up picking a cold, and I literally shifted the last of the symptoms overnight before the race. I think it's just one of those cases whereby when you finish the tapering off, and I tend to leave no running, no form of exercise in the week before a massive ultra like this, so that you have a bit of a spring in your step and that you're cleared of all tiredness and what have you. Well, actually, that gave way to all of the cold symptoms coming out. And because I had nothing planned in terms of exercise, then I didn't feel too guilty that I was missing any training or racing or what have you, or any cross training. So I could just rest up and just make sure that I was fit for the start line, which I was, which was great news. So I started this time also to start carb loading about a day and a half before. Normally I don't carb load, but I thought I'd try a little bit more this time. But I did feel a bit sluggish though, and I got to the point, I think, the day before, which I was just a bit fed up of eating and just felt really, really full and sluggish. So I travelled down the day before. My partner kindly drove part of the way, and I drove part of the way. We stayed locally-ish because my partner wanted to do the park run on the morning before the ultra. So I helped out volunteer at the park run locally, and they were events at Queen Elizabeth Park, so we had a bit of a taste for the area before the race had even started. So I sat there on my deck chair handing out finishing tokens to the participants of Queen Elizabeth Park Run before I did my ultra, which was in effect just killing time before I did my ultra. But it also gave my mind something to do rather than worrying or thinking about the race. So that was a nice gap filler, as it were. So then I got ready on the day, final pack of the bag, and I did my preps, such as taping up my toes with K-tape, putting a little bit of trench on the areas of the skin that may be exposed for a little bit of protection, made sure that I had socks that were adequate, shoes that had worked out for me in the past and that I'd chosen based upon the fact that they don't eat my feet. I use Mizuno trail running shoes. I did use Innovate in my last ultra, but it just didn't work out. It just didn't work out at all, and I ended up wrecking my toes. So this time round, I used the Mizuno trail shoes, and they worked out fine, absolutely fine. I had a couple of hot spots by the end, but far less hassle than with the Innovates that I used previously. So that was my feet. On the top, I just wore the usual trail rucksack, and I used one bladder 500 ml water bladder. I took one as spare but left it empty the entire time. My thinking from this is that because there are aid stations at 10 miles or less, there was no way that I'd be getting through more than 500 mils between each aid station. And in the past, on warmer ultras, particularly for the Cotswold Way Ultra, I found that I was just carrying around heavy water, which was a waste of my time. And whilst there was warm weather, there was no way that I'd be getting through that much water, and I just end up carrying around, which wears you out. So I took that decision, and that decision worked out quite well indeed. I had all of the rest of the essential kit. I did forget a couple of plasters for sensitive areas, so I had to do a last minute dash to the first aid guy in the paramedic van and say, can I have a couple of plasters, or else you're going to end up with a first aid incident towards the end. So anyway, I was finished with my plasters, ready to go by the start line, and then we were off at midday. It was relatively warm once the race started, and we got into our running. It was fairly flattish. There were obviously some hills, but nothing like the monsters towards the end. So I got into a steady running pace. After about a mile, there was a lady who stopped soon in front of me and said, "Oh my God, I've forgotten my phone, where have I dropped it?" And she dashed back really panicked. I think she ended up being the first lady, but anyway, she came back ahead of me after about 4 miles and then suddenly ground to a halt, and I was thinking, what's this about? It's slightly weird behaviour. And it wasn't until one of the marshal points that I then got to that I realised that for some time, I think that I was actually first lady in the race, and I just had a bit of a panic. Because I never entered the race to be winning awards or prizes. I entered the race to get round, to finish the 100-mile distance, to do a run, to have a good day out. So I think that because suddenly I had this awareness that people were saying, "Oh, First Lady, First Lady," I suddenly felt under a huge amount of pressure. It was totally weird. I'd never had that situation before in a race. It's very unnerving, very unnerving. So I was actually quite relieved when she was back in first place again, but of course that meant that I was in second place. And I actually held on to that second place for about 82 miles. It's absolutely incredible. I was actually in second place until about 93, 94 miles. Absolutely incredible. Well, anyway, yeah, onwards with the story. What I found was on the first day that, well, when I say the first day, until darkness came, and that would have been about 9:30, 9:10, because it's getting dark quite late at this time of year. It had been fairly hot during the day. I found that even though I was drinking the electrolytes, I was doing everything I should have done. Then I did experience some cramping, but I don't think I was alone in this respect. I saw lots of people having to pull over and stretch and what have you. So I'd never had cramping before like this. But I was doing everything I could. I was adequately hydrated. I was getting the right minerals in. I think it was just because it was really, really hot, that's all. It was trying to run in really, really hot conditions. But I couldn't have taken on any more water. I mean, I was drinking adequately. There was still fluids coming out the other end, as it were, so there's nothing more that I felt that I can do in terms of the electrolytes and the fluids and what have you. It was just cramping in the conditions. It It was very, very humid that first afternoon, very humid indeed. So then we were pootling along, and I think after about 20 miles the hills started to kick in a bit more as you're coming into the South Downs way, more and more and more and more. And what I found is that the weather was starting to close in. I think it was about 11 o'clock at night. It started to spot, and then it started hammering down. And it didn't stop hammering down for about 7 hours. So it was very heavy rain, very heavy wind on the ridge, and you also had limited visibility because you were up fairly high. And that meant that that at times the only thing that I was following was the GPS little red arrow on my Garmin watch, because on the top of the South Downs Way, because it's very touristy, you have paths going all sorts of directions, and there will be paths that on the OS maps and sheep trods and what have you. So I was literally going off my GPS red little arrow marker at some points, thinking, well, I hope I'm going in the right direction. I mean, there's only one time when I slipped slightly off of course, but I only lost about a quarter to half a mile. It was nothing huge at all, but it was literally running along sheep tracks and things like that. It was just bonkers. But anyway, very grateful for dawn once it arrived. Still, we had fairly low visibility for the first hour after dawn, but at least I had a clear indication of where the paths were. So then we came down into the daylight, and that gave way to much warmer weather again, and so I was able to take off the waterproofs again that I'd had on the entire night. I was absolutely sodden, bless me. I was absolutely wet through. The funny thing is, right, I changed into my other trainers at the 50-mile point, and then immediately it started lashing down with rain. So I'd got on these lovely dry trainers that then became trashed, and I'd also just retaped a couple of my toes where I'd had blisters and what have you, and I had a blister plaster on one hot spot. So immediately all of my K-tape was wet, and I took the executive decision not to even change my socks or shoes at the second drop bag point, because it was just futile, because it was still raining by the 70-mile mark. Anyway, I digress. So into the second day, and it was slightly less warm first thing in the morning than the afternoon before, but then the temperatures picked up a little bit more, not as high as the afternoon before, but it was still noticeably warmer. The rain dropped by about, was it about 7 o'clock in the morning? But you still had these really heavy cutting winds over the top of the ridge. Really heavy winds, so you're being buffeted. And after hours and hours of being buffeted in the wind, it really kind of takes a toll. And I think by the end, I was suffering a bit with exposure. I mean, I say a bit. The last 5 miles took me 2 hours, 10 minutes, because I literally had no fight left against the buffeting wind. I got to the point which I just literally had to walk it in, because I was literally being buffeted in the wind. Even with sticks, I was being buffeted in the wind around. So that was fairly hard going. But in terms of the race organisation, I found that there were 2 drop bags, which are fantastic. They helped me out. The aid stations had exactly the same food at all of the stations, so it was predictable about what you'd be eating, so there's no surprises. On this occasion, normally I'd find myself eating the same thing throughout a race, and then I'd switch halfway between sweet for the first half to savoury in the second half. But I stuck all the way through with sweet this time, and they had loads of gels available, and I don't normally use gels, but I felt myself strongly drawn to using the gels this time round, which is very bizarre. So mentally, my body was asking to have gels, and lots of them. I mean, I must have had at least 20 gels throughout the Ultra, and I had no GI issues at all. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, that on top of having jelly babies, and also had the squishy chews, the drumstick squishy chews. I got through a couple of packs of them as well. So I was literally hitting the sugar, which I've never known that during an Ultra. I've known to, well, I've probably had, 3 vegan sausage rolls and maybe a few bits of watermelon here and there, but yeah, totally sugary, sweet, all the way. Incredible, and absolutely more incredibly, no GI issues, no tummy issues whatsoever. Brilliant. So the aid stations were fantastic. The organisation and the volunteers, absolutely incredible. They had first-class volunteers helping out. They were quite clearly people who were committed to supporting the event. Quite a lot of them were runners themselves. I spoke to some of them, and they were like former care workers, former nurses, and you can just tell that they cared about you and they wanted the best from you. And they all wanted you to get to the finish line, and no matter what you said or come out with, they said, "Oh no, you'll make it, you'll be fine," and all this sort of stuff, and they offered support like filling up your water bottle or getting you this or that, or can I get you a sandwich, and and yeah, so there were some really, really knowledgeable and helpful people down along the course. In terms of getting to the finish, I'd want to offer my thanks to my partner. She popped up once on the Saturday night, which is most unexpected, towards Arundel. I thought that she was just going back to the accommodation and having dinner, but no, she popped out for half an hour and had a very quick jog for half an hour and then back to the car. And that was unexpected. So she had a little walk with me then, and then it was the next morning. Yeah, she popped her head up towards Southease, which I was jogging at a far quicker pace, and she'd not even had a coffee that morning yet. So she popped off, and then she popped up again at the next aid station, or was it the one after that? And by that stage, I think I was still doing okay. And then she was there for when the wheels really fell off the wagon, and she helped me out of a chair into aid stations. I said, "Lady, help me out of my chair, please." And she did very kindly, and she hauled me from underneath my arms, because other than that, one of the aid station volunteers said that they would offer to tip me out of my chair, which was the other alternative, which I said, no, it's all right. Because by that stage, I think by the stage that this sort of thing was starting to happen, and this sort of nonsense was starting to happen, was when your quads were really gone, and you had like no strength in your quads left whatsoever because they'd just been trashed from the downhills. And you literally couldn't get the purchase to get out of your chair. It's very hard to describe, but you cannot get out of the chair. No matter how much you want or the willpower, your quads are gone. They're gone. They're gone. So that was good that she was around for that. That was great, because it saves the volunteers at the aid stations having to peel me or tip me out of a chair. Yeah, so the wheels came off the wagon, as it were, during the last 10 miles. And to be fair, this is probably the position which I got to on my first 100-miler, the Cotswold Way Ultra. I got to the 92-mile point, and I just ran out of gas. There was absolutely nothing in the tank. And I felt that way during this one at about the 90-mile point. There was nothing in the tank. But the difference here is that I knew that I can get to the end. I knew that I can get to the end on this day. So, whereas in the second 100-mile attempt, which was the Arc, I got to the 80-mile point back in January, and I was timed out, not on my terms, I was timed out on the organisation's terms by 20 minutes. This time I could carry on. And so, having had that behind me, of somebody saying to me that I couldn't carry on, it was within my remit that I can carry on, and I had the power to carry on, which is a huge psychological difference. And I did carry on, because I had absolutely oodles of time by then. I had a window of about 11 hours to finish the last 10 miles, so I was sure as damn it going to do it. In the end, it took me 2 hours 10 minutes to do the final 5 miles. So that's how slowly I was going, and every step was hard. I was being buffeted in the wind. I had to put my waterproof top on, actually, despite the fact it was a warm day, because I was just being chilled to the core, because I was moving so slowly that I had to have another layer on to protect me against the wind cutting through me, because the wind was so strong. And at that point also, at that stage of the event, you'd been out on the course for 26, 27 hours by that point, through the wind and the rain overnight. I genuinely think I had exposure by that point, and I was feeling shaky, and I was feeling really cold despite the sunny day and all that, and I was starting to basically go downhill. And I just said to my partner, just look after me coming in across the finishing line, which she did, and she walked just in front of me slightly, and also by my side, to make sure that I safely crossed the finishing line, because I did not feel well. I did not feel well at all. In this event, they have this totally bizarre situation that they have a field towards the end of the Beachy Head Downs, and you come down into Eastbourne, and you come into, I think it's Helen Gardens, and there's this little green park that is this stretch of grass, and you almost have to do this finale lap. It's absolutely absurd, given that I was walking really slowly round this park. Like, how is that even a finishing lap? I don't know. I don't know whether I was being expected to run at that point, but anyway, no. I just kind of just walked around and just went through the finishing line, and I held my partner's hand, and I crossed the finishing line. Yeah, so thoughts about the event. Absolutely immaculate organisation. I thought the aid stations were absolutely fantastic. I'd encourage anyone to do this event, because quite frankly, the landscape is really dramatic. The hills, whilst they aren't as high as the hills around here in Wales, they're still pretty steep. There's some fantastic trail running to be had as well. Fantastic views, and it's great. And they want you to finish. They want you to get round, unlike the Arc of Attrition, which they don't want people to finish, quite frankly, because they want it to be an event that's iconic and beats people. Whereas in this event, they want people to get to the finishing line, which is such a major positive difference. I got round in 28 hours. And you could say, oh, well, what if I hadn't shuffled towards the end? Yeah, I might have finished in about 26 hours, maybe, for my first 100-mile finish. But from where I'm sitting, I'm not going to be revisiting this distance of ultra running event. I'm going to be cutting back to much smaller fell races and cross-country events now. I've done my thing. I had unfinished business after the Cotswold Way Ultra and the Arc of Attrition, and I've done my 100. The goal is complete, and I'm just going to go back to shorter stuff now. Not so much because of the training load, because the training is very, very similar to a marathon training. Maybe I'll do some marathons again in the future, I don't know. But I'm just going to cut back to shorter fell races for the foreseeable, because it's something that I quite enjoy, and it's local to me. And let's face it, there's only so many of these large events that you can do, because they tend to cost a little more than a fell race. So if anybody wants to ask me anything about this race or training for 100, then just let me know. I also like to extend my thanks to my club colleagues at Fairwater Runners Cwmbran, to the other coaches at the club, to the other members at the club for their support, to the friends and family who supported me throughout my running journey, and last but not least to my partner, who helped me literally supervise me over the finishing line, because I think this time she wanted me to damn well get over the finishing line, because she'd had enough of me not finishing hundreds. So yeah, third time lucky. Yeah, okay. The one more thing before I do close this one off, and I've not felt it as much as at this race before, is my gender. Being a woman, and being a woman of a certain age, i.e. I'm 50, and so my experience was that quite a lot of the volunteers were of a similar age to me at the aid stations as I was going around, and their response to seeing another woman who looks like them, of a similar age to them, was absolutely fantastic. And they were like, oh, it's another woman, and they were like, ooh. And even at the one aid station, one of the volunteers said to me, oh, well, we've got a special deck chair for women, because the men tend to sweat a lot, or what have you. So she'd actually got this special deck chair for women with a fresh fleecy blanket. So how could you say no to that? So I felt very coddled by the other women volunteers at the aid stations, because they recognised that I was just one of them. And that was just lovely, because only 1 in 5 of the participants of the 100 were female. And so for them, I think it was a bit of a rarity seeing a woman coming through, particularly in the middle of the night. And one of the volunteers in particular gave me a very, very heartwarming look, as if to say, good on you, keep on doing it, because you're doing it for us. And I don't feel as though I'm being this, like, female empowering kind of, I'm doing it for the entire womanhood. What I think was conveyed was a little bit more sensitive, in that she's saying, yeah, crack on and do it for people like us, because there's not enough of us doing stuff like this, and we need more women of a certain age to be just doing stuff like this. And that's what she was trying to convey, and I found that really, really moving, and she looked really moved when she said that. So yeah, I just wanted to end this little video on that note, is that sometimes the people that you meet on these things not only inspire you, but you may actually be inspiring them. I mean, I don't set out to be inspiring, but maybe it's something that just being there and just being a woman, just being a 50-year-old woman and being an older woman, so slightly older woman on the course, lets people know that it's just alright to be doing stuff like this. So yeah, that's just a little closing thought. Anyway, happy running, happy trail running, and do get in touch if you'd like any information about anything that I've been talking about, or any information or insider knowledge about the race. Take care, happy running.